Grayson clutched his books, a shield against the jeering faces. The weight of the textbooks felt like a small comfort, a barrier between him and the world that seemed so hostile. Each step he took echoed in the dimly lit hallway, amplifying his anxiety. The faces around him blurred into a sea of judgment, each one a potential threat. He hated the walk across campus, hated the way his heart pounded with fear. The sprawling university grounds, which should have been a place of learning and growth, felt more like a battleground. Every corner he turned, every building he passed seemed to hold a new challenge, a new set of eyes watching him. The anxiety was a constant companion, a shadow that never left his side. At 18, university was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance to reinvent himself. He had dreamed of this moment for years, imagining a place where he could finally be himself, free from the constraints of his past. The campus, with its historic buildings and bustling student life, had seemed like a beacon of hope. But reality had a way of shattering dreams, and the fresh start he had hoped for felt more like a continuation of old nightmares. Instead, it felt like high school all over again. The same cliques, the same whispers behind his back, the same feeling of being an outsider. He had hoped that university would be different, that people would be more mature, more accepting, but the reality was harsh, and the sense of disappointment weighed heavily on him. It was as if he had never left high school, as if the past had followed him here. He was small for his age, a wiry frame that seemed to attract bullies like moths to a flame. His slight build made him an easy target, and he could feel the eyes of others on him, judging, mocking. It was a feeling he knew all too well, one that had haunted him throughout his school years. The vulnerability he felt was palpable, a constant reminder of his perceived weakness. Their laughter echoed in his ears, their words like poison darts. Each taunt, each cruel joke pierced his confidence, leaving him feeling more isolated and alone. The laughter was a constant background noise, a reminder of his outsider status. It was as if the universe had conspired to keep him in a perpetual state of fear and insecurity. He just wanted to blend in, to disappear into the crowd. The desire to be invisible, to go unnoticed, was overwhelming. He longed for the anonymity that others seemed to take for granted. But no matter how hard he tried, he always felt like he stood out, like a beacon for ridicule. The more he tried to hide, the more visible he seemed to become. But some people are born targets. It was a harsh truth he had come to accept. No matter where he went, no matter how much he tried to change, there would always be those who saw him as an easy mark. The feeling of being targeted was a constant weight on his shoulders, a burden he carried with him every day. It was a reality he had learned to live with, but one he desperately wished he could escape. The library offered a sanctuary, its silence a balm to his raw nerves. Within its walls, he found a refuge from the chaos of the outside world. The quiet, the smell of old books, the soft rustle of pages turning. It was a world where he could lose himself, where the pressures of university life seemed to fade away. The library was his haven, a place where he could breathe and find a moment of peace. He found solace in books, in worlds where heroes rose and monsters fell. The stories he read transported him to places where courage and strength triumphed over adversity. In those pages, he found the inspiration he needed, the hope that maybe, just maybe, he could find his own strength. The characters in his books became his friends, his mentors, guiding him through the darkest times. He longed for a hero of his own, someone to banish the shadows that haunted him. The idea of a savior, someone who could lift him out of his despair, was a constant daydream. He imagined a figure who would stand up for him, who would see his worth, and help him find his place in the world. It was a comforting thought, one that gave him a glimmer of hope in his darkest moments. Little did he know he was about to become that hero. The journey ahead would be filled with challenges, but it would also be a path to self-discovery and empowerment. Grayson would learn that the strength he sought was within him all along, waiting to be unleashed. The trials he faced would forge him into the person he was meant to be, a hero in his own right. They called themselves the Pack, a trio of seniors who ruled the social hierarchy with an iron fist. Their presence was felt in every corner of the school, from the bustling hallways to the quiet corners of the library. They were the unchallenged kings of the high school jungle, and everyone knew it. Their leader, Jake, was a hulking figure with a cruel smirk permanently etched on his face. His eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the crowd for any sign of weakness. He thrived on fear and reveled in the power he held over his peers. He moved with an air of entitlement, as if the world owed him obedience. His every step was a declaration of his dominance, and no one dared to challenge him. His arrogance was palpable, a toxic cloud that suffocated anyone who crossed his path. Their favorite pastime was tormenting Grayson, shoving him into lockers, making him the butt of their cruel jokes, and ensuring he never had a moment's peace. Grayson was their chosen target, the one they delighted in breaking down. Tripping him in the cafeteria, spilling his lunch tray, and laughing as he scrambled to pick up the pieces. It was a daily ritual, a twisted game they played to assert their dominance, whispering insults that stung like acid, eroding his self-esteem bit by bit. They knew exactly what to say to cut him to the core, to make him feel small and insignificant. Grayson endured it all, his anger simmering beneath a facade of indifference. He tried to ignore them, to pretend their words and actions didn't affect him, but the truth was, they did. Every shove, every insult, every laugh at his expense chipped away at his resolve. He knew fighting back was futile. They were bigger, stronger, and always had backup. Any attempt to stand up for himself would only result in more pain, more humiliation. So he kept his head down and tried to stay out of their way. They were bigger, stronger, and always had backup. The pack was a well-oiled machine, each member playing their part to maintain their reign of terror. They thrived on the fear they instilled in others, and they were always on the lookout for new victims.
One day I saw them harassing a girl near the library. It was a scene that had played out countless times before, but this time, something was different. There was a fire in her eyes, a defiance that I hadn't seen in their previous victims. Her back was to me, but I recognized the cascade of fiery hair. It was unmistakable, a vibrant red that stood out in any crowd. I knew who she was even before she turned around. It was Sarah, the girl from my literature class, the one with eyes that sparkled like distant galaxies. She was smart, kind, and had a quiet strength that drew people to her. She was the last person I expected to see standing up to the pack. I felt a surge of protectiveness, a primal urge to shield her from harm. I couldn't just stand by and watch as they tried to break her spirit. I had to do something, anything to help her. The thought of her enduring the same torment as Grayson was unbearable. With a deep breath, I stepped forward, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what I was going to do or say, but I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. The time had come to stand up to the pack, to show them that their reign of terror was over. The confrontation was tense, a standoff that felt like it lasted an eternity. But in that moment, I realized something important. The power the pack held was an illusion, a facade that crumbled the moment someone had the courage to stand up to them. Sarah's grateful smile was all the reward I needed. In that moment, I knew that standing up to the pack was the right thing to do. It was the beginning of the end for their reign of terror, and the start of a new chapter for all of us.
Sarah was different. She wasn't like the others who merely glanced at Grayson and saw only his quiet demeanor, his reluctance to speak up in class, or his tendency to sit alone during lunch breaks. Sarah saw beyond the surface, beyond the walls he had built around himself to keep the world at bay. She saw the depth of his thoughts, the richness of his inner world, and the kindness that lay hidden beneath layers of self-doubt and fear. She saw past his shyness, past the fear that clung to him like a shroud. She understood the pain that came from being misunderstood, from feeling like an outsider in a world that valued extroversion and confidence. Sarah had her own battles, her own moments of doubt and insecurity, but she had learned to navigate them with grace and empathy. She reached out to Grayson, not out of pity, but out of a genuine desire to connect, to share a part of herself with someone who needed it. She talked to him after class, her laughter like music to his ears. It was a sound that broke through the silence of his world, a melody that brought warmth to the cold, empty spaces of his heart. They would walk together, sometimes in comfortable silence, other times in deep conversation about their favorite books, their dreams, and their fears. Each moment spent with Sarah was a step away from the shadows that had long enveloped him. They discovered a shared love for books, for escaping into worlds where anything was possible. In the quiet corners of the library, they would sit together, lost in the pages of their favorite novels. They would discuss the characters, the plot twists, and the themes that resonated with them. It was in these moments that Grayson felt a connection, a sense of belonging that he had never experienced before. The stories they read became a bridge between their souls, a way to communicate the unspoken truths that lay within them. For the first time in a long time, Grayson felt a flicker of hope. It was a fragile thing, like a candle flame in the wind, but it was there. He began to look forward to their time together, to the moments when he could let down his guard and be himself. Sarah's presence was a balm to his wounded spirit, a light that guided him through the darkness.
I started looking forward to our encounters, to the way her smile could chase away the darkness that threatened to consume me. Her smile was like the sun breaking through the clouds, a beacon of warmth and light that dispelled the shadows of my fears. I found myself counting the hours until I could see her again, until I could hear her laugh and feel the comfort of her presence. I found myself daydreaming about her, about a future where the bullies didn't exist, where we could be happy. In my mind, I painted a picture of a life where we were free from the judgments and expectations of others, where we could be ourselves without fear. I imagined us exploring new places, sharing new experiences, and building a life together that was filled with love and understanding. I knew I had to tell her how I felt, but the words always seemed to catch in my throat. Every time I tried to express my feelings, my heart would race, and my mind would be flooded with doubts. What if she didn't feel the same way? What if I ruined the friendship that had become so precious to me? The fear of rejection was a constant companion, a shadow that loomed over every interaction. I was too afraid of ruining everything, of scaring her away with my fear. The thought of losing her was unbearable, and so I kept my feelings hidden, locked away in the deepest corners of my heart. I convinced myself that it was better this way, that our friendship was enough, even if it meant living with the ache of unspoken words. I was content to cherish our stolen moments, to pretend that our world was perfect. In those fleeting moments, I allowed myself to believe that we were more than just friends, that there was a possibility of something greater. I held on to the hope that one day I would find the courage to tell her how I truly felt, and that she would feel the same way. But reality had a way of shattering illusions. The world outside our little bubble was harsh and unforgiving, and it had a way of intruding on our happiness. The bullies, the pressures of school, and the expectations of others were constant reminders that our perfect world was just a fragile illusion. And yet, even in the face of these challenges, the flicker of hope remained, a small but persistent light that refused to be extinguished.
The night of the bonfire, Grayson finally worked up the courage to ask Sarah out. He found her by the flickering flames, her face illuminated by the dancing firelight.
Yes.
She said yes, her eyes shining with amusement at his nervousness. For a brief moment, Grayson allowed himself to believe that things were finally looking up. Then he saw them, Jake and his cronies, their faces twisted into menacing grins. They were drunk, their eyes gleaming with malice. They circled Grayson and Sarah, their laughter like the snarling of wolves. Jake slung an arm around Sarah's shoulders, his touch possessive and cruel.
Well, look who's got himself a girlfriend. Don't worry, Shrimp, we'll take good care of her for you.
Fear coiled in Grayson's stomach, cold and suffocating. He knew what was coming. He had to protect her.